When something is always there, people stop seeing it. Water from the tap, the chair in the corner, the person who always answers on the first ring. They do not think about these things. They do not protect them. They do not fear losing them, because in their mind, these things will simply always be there. Do not let that person be you. This is the story of a man named Elias, a man who gave everything he had to everyone who asked. In the quiet morning, he finally understood what it had cost him. Elias lived in a town at the foot of a wide valley. He repaired clocks for a living, small, patient work, done mostly in silence. He had a narrow workshop with 2 windows and a wooden bench worn smooth from years of use. He was a man people trusted, not because he was loud or persuasive, because he was there. When a neighbor needed help moving furniture before dawn, Elias came. When a friend needed someone to sit with him through bad news, Elias sat. When his brother called at midnight with a problem that could have waited until morning, Elias answered. He answered. He always answered. He told himself this was generosity. He told himself this was what a good man did. He did not yet see the difference between giving freely and being taken freely. In the same town lived a woman named Petra. She was a baker. She opened her shop at 6 in the morning and closed it at noon, and after noon she was not available. Not for orders, not for favors, not for anyone who had forgotten to come during opening hours. People in town found this irritating at first. Why couldn't she stay open a little longer? Why couldn't she make an exception? Just this once. She never explained herself. She simply closed the door. What happened over time was strange. People began to arrive early. They planned around her hours. They respected the boundary not because she had argued for it, but because she had never removed it. Elias noticed this. He noticed the way people spoke about Petra's bread, with anticipation, with care, as though it were something to be sought, not assumed. He noticed no one spoke about him that way. He was simply there, like the tap, like the chair in the corner. Elias had tried once to say no. A colleague had asked him to cover a task that was not his responsibility. Elias had a full day of his own work waiting. He had plans that evening, small plans, private ones, the kind that matter most. He said he was not sure he could manage it this time. The colleague looked surprised, then a little hurt. Then he said quietly that he had always been able to count on Elias. That was all it took. Elias covered the task. He missed his plans. He lay in bed that night with the particular exhaustion that has nothing to do with the body. He told himself the colleague had genuinely needed help. He told himself the plans were small. He told himself that next time he would say no. He did not say no the next time, or the time after that. The requests kept arriving because the door was always open. People are not cruel, most of them. They simply go where there is no resistance. They take the open road without thinking about the road. The signs were quiet, as they often are. Elias began waking earlier than he needed to, as though his mind could not afford to rest. He began leaving his workshop door open even when he wanted to close it, afraid someone might need something and find him absent. He stopped working on the old clock in the corner, the one he was repairing for himself, with no deadline and no customer. He kept setting it aside for something more urgent. There was always something more urgent. His friend Otto noticed. Otto was a quiet man who spoke rarely, but said things worth keeping. One afternoon he sat across from Elias in the workshop and said, without preamble, "You look like a man who hasn't had a thought of his own in weeks." Elias laughed. Then he stopped laughing. He could not remember his last thought that belonged only to him. The moment came on a Thursday. Elias was ill, not gravely, a heavy cold, a fever that would pass. But he was ill enough that he locked the workshop, drew the curtains, and lay down in the middle of the afternoon. His phone rang within the hour. A neighbor with a small problem. Elias apologized and explained he was unwell. The neighbor paused, then said he was sure Elias could manage just a quick look. Elias got up. He drove to the neighbor's house. He solved the small problem in 20 minutes. He drove home colder than before and sat on the edge of his bed. He sat there for a long time. He thought about the neighbor's pause, that small, certain pause before the words, "I'm sure you can manage," as though Elias being ill was an obstacle, not a fact, as though his body were a scheduling inconvenience. He thought about the clock in the corner of his workshop, still unfinished, still waiting. He had been repairing everyone else's time and letting his own run out. Elias recovered from the cold in 4 days. On the fifth day, he walked to Petra's bakery. It was 20 minutes past noon. The door was closed. He stood there a moment, looking at the sign in the window. Back tomorrow at 6. Simple. No apology, no explanation. He walked home and did something he had not done in years. He closed the workshop at midday. He took the phone off the table. He sat down with the old clock and worked on it slowly, with no deadline, for the rest of the afternoon. Nobody came to the door. Or perhaps someone did and went away again. He did not know. He found he did not need to know. Over the weeks that followed, Elias began to close the door at a regular hour. He began to let certain calls go unanswered until the next morning. He began finishing his own work before taking on anyone else's. The requests did not stop, but something about them changed. People asked differently, with more care, with a sense that his time was worth asking about, rather than simply assumed. Some of them, for the first time, asked if it was a good moment. He had taught them, without a word, that it mattered. Elias finished the old clock that winter. He set it on the shelf above his bench where he could see it while he worked. He never sold it. It was not for sale. There is a belief that many kind people carry, that being needed is the same as being valued, that the more available you are, the more loved you are, that saying yes is generous and saying no is selfish. It is a belief worth examining, because the people who are taken for granted are almost never the cold ones. They are the warm ones, the ones who answer, the ones who come, the ones who leave the door open so long that people forget it was ever meant to close. So ask yourself this: do the people around you ask for your time, or do they assume it? Do they consider what you have going on, or do they begin with what they need? When you are unavailable, do they wait and understand, or do they look surprised as though you had broken a rule? You are not a service. You are not a door that must stay open at all hours for anyone who walks past. Availability without boundaries is not kindness. It is self-erasure. And you cannot build a life worth living if you are always building someone else's instead. Rest when you need to rest. Close the door when the day is done. Let the call go unanswered until you are ready. The right people will come back. They will find you in the morning, and they will be glad you were worth waiting for.